So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and we have actually seen this map before, but it hasn't been for an awfully long time. This is MINAS FALATH, and it's a rather strange map in the sense that you have these very deep trenches with the rivers running through them. The defenders have got a few, this is a 3v5 defence by the way, with 3 Gondorian armies arrayed against the forces that are upon them. Now, like I was saying, this is a rather interesting defence because there are a number of conundrums for the defenders to have to try and work their way through. There are a few good positions, but you don't want to fall back immediately to the choke points on the bridges here because it leaves you with very few areas to go, and as we have seen somewhat recently, that can be quite difficult for you if you misjudge that as the defenders. There are some outer areas, but you don't want to go too heavily into them either, because while you can take cover in these outer settlements, you can very easily find yourself surrounded by a numerically superior force, and that is exactly what the Gondorians find themselves arrayed against here. Now, the Womb Raider is the one who sent me this battle replay. I believe Winged Swordsman 44 may have also sent me this one as well. Initially I was going to do this one because I was going to break up some of the ones that he was sending me, because he sent me an awful lot all in one big go, and I was going to try and spread them out a little bit more, but hey ho, here we are. This is going to be the next one that we see, so I mean it's going to be on a map that we haven't seen before, hopefully in a competitive siege as well. A map we haven't seen for a while, and hopefully it's going to be a competitive battle at that as well. Going to be an interesting one for sure, and it's going to be obviously 3 Gondorian armies like I mentioned, with a force of evil coming for them, and we shall start off once again with Harad, and this time he's going to be playing as the forces of Mordor rather than Angmar, so same vibes, but they're going to have to achieve their ends slightly differently. He's got some Orc fodder on the front line, of course. They can be committed forward without any sort of regard for their safety, which is, to be fair, what most of the standard Mordor units have, but you can do so very much so with the Orc fodder because of how dirt cheap they really are. Rhun on infantry, to be fair, as a line infantry unit, they're perfectly functional. I mean, they're decently numerous as well. They're not the most numerous kind of line infantry you can get, but you know, they do balance out by having slightly better defensive values than some of those that we could mention, like heavy goblin infantry, for example. But for the most part, they are going to be sent forward as part of a numbers-focused assault anyway. Some upgraded Orc Maulers as well. I mean, this will help their survivability just a little bit, perhaps. But still, they're going to be very vulnerable to ranged fire. They're still going to be vulnerable in melee because of their low melee defense, but they're facing off against Gondor. Armor piercing is always going to be useful against Gondor. There are a few units which are less armored, but they're almost entirely, well, they are entirely ranged units, and by the time they're being committed to melee, it's panic stations, so you definitely want armor piercing against Gondor. It's one of the biggest no-brainers that there is. We also have some Rhun on Halberd, which also offer the same thing, but are also somewhat necessary for Mordor because they're the only phalanx unit that you really have available to you. So just to help anchor your lines in place, this is very useful. Olag High, naturally trolls, you know, they can do damage really very, very quickly. Timing is kind of everything with trolls, as I keep mentioning. Olag High can take more of a beating than most of them can, so you do have a little bit more margin for error, but you don't want to waste a unit like this unthinkingly by sending it into the meat grinder when Gondor are fully prepared. Low tier javelins are going to be useful against the Gondorians as well because of that armor piercing, also because Gondor, one of Gondor's strengths of course, is their very powerful skirmish lineup. They don't want to be using that if they can help it on a unit this cheap, but they may have no choice if Mordor play it correctly. 2 units of Blackguard of Barad-dûr, fantastic for pushing through stubborn defensive positions, which the Gondorians will undoubtedly be laying on for Mordor. And then some Temple Executioners and Temple Guard as well, fantastic heavy swordsmen and armor-piercing archers both. And that's all we can see. There could be a few hidden units from Mordor, but not too many. Then we have DF Mevin, who's playing as Rhun, another good faction to be having on your side against the Gondorians because of their armor-piercing slant, but also because among the evil factions they're fairly well balanced as well. They've got a little bit more of the quality in their mid-tier that they can utilise. Scionrum, however, an upper-tier unit of spears, kind of against the grain really, in the sense they're not armor-piercing and almost entirely defensively minded, but still very good defensively minded spears, very, very tanky indeed. We've got some Eastron crossbows up here on the hill. Armour upgrade, so they're going to be a little bit more resilient to any Gondorian arrow fire, but still going to be one of the first ports of call for the Gondorian archers if they can possibly be hit. Got some Narim back there as well for trading fire with the Gondorians. The Eastron warriors are here with the armour upgrade again. Will help them a little bit, but for the most part the Gondorian archers are going to slice their way through them pretty easily, but in melee they can be pretty good, especially for a lower end unit like this. Maybe that's Mevin's thinking here, like the Gondorian archers have got better things to be going after. If they do get into melee they'll be effective, even if they're getting shot they're still kind of doing their job. from that perspective. The flag room, of course, a no-brainer against the Gondorians for the reasons I've already mentioned. Armor piercing, good front line, good solid front line. Another unit of them in behind, and then we have some clansmen combined with Gamp Rim back here. Upgraded clansmen acting as the buffer for the runic halberdiers, and then any bodyguard units that we can perceive. Doesn't look like it actually, so maybe going for a fully sort of mid-tier focused army, which is fairly interesting. We shall see if there are any hidden units to be found later on. Now then, the Haradrim played by Pedro. We've already seen a large Harad versus Gondor siege recently with the Haradrim on the defence. In that situation, they didn't have quite enough to get over the line, and a lot of that had to do with Harad's own shortcomings in their melee defence and defensive values in general. But in this situation, they're going to be attacking, and they're going to be doing so alongside perhaps some factions that can help make up for that. Haradrim Spearmen, of course, are very, very basic. We have some Southron archers just for the token skirmishing that Harad could do. We've got some Serpent's Fangs up here, which that goes beyond a little bit more token skirmishing. They can actually genuinely go toe-to-toe with even the best Gondorian archers at range. Not very damaging. Poison projectiles could come into play later on, maybe. Gondor's morale is not impervious, but they should be fairly resilient with elite units around them. Upgraded Serpent Guard also give them a good quality infantry unit, kind of similar to the Flag Room, only again more about melee defense and base damage values. The armor piercing is more useful in this situation, but the Serpent Guard will certainly still not be a bad choice. 2 units of Trollmen, as we've mentioned several times, the Trollmen against many, many factions are a real problem, and especially against a faction like Gondor for the armor piercing power that they bring. Southron Pikes, I mean, they're very basic. We actually saw in the recent Harad Gondor siege them be useful, pretty useful anyway. Very often, in spite of their armor piercing, which you might think makes them overpowered, their very, very low stats often means that they crumble in the face of pressure. Muhard Beast Hunters, and then a couple of units of high-tier Trollmen as well. Champions of Nafra, the melee variant, and then the Demons of the Desert, of course, which Gondor can't really afford to be taking any really good volleys from the Demons of the Desert. They need to be dealing with them before that becomes a problem. Then we have Cand, played by DF Josh, Nurad Footman, kind of a similar layout with their infantry as you would expect from Rhun. Nurad Footman obviously have got those big shields as well, so could be good at dealing with the Gondorian skirmish. We've also got some Nurad halberds in here, a couple of units of nomadic marauders, low-tier javelins, like we already said. For the Orc javelins are very useful. Variag Bowman with the armor upgrade, Cand also very, very capable of trading fire with the Gondorians archer to archer, which is part of the reason why Cand don't suffer so much from the cavalry being what it is in this version of the game. Nomadic raiders also going to do the same. Nomadic axemen for some low-tier, but still potentially, excuse me, efficient heavy axemen. Brotherhood of the Spear, Nurad Footman, and Brotherhood of the Axe back here as well for some high tier options. Nurad Stormguard obviously fantastic, and the Hwacha, I mean, on a map like this is also going to be the sort of thing which kind of prevents the Gondorians from falling back as quickly as they may like, because if they do so, they'll be bunched up, the Hwacha will be very, very efficient, and then obviously the superior numbers of the attacking armies will be able to swamp forward and overwhelm them. So again, something else for the defence to have to consider. I mean, the attackers, they know how they're going to play this. How will the Gondorians go about things? And then last, but by no means least, we have Hunter or Hunted, who is going to be playing as Umbar, a high-quality attacking faction as well, to add themselves into the mix. Balagai Footmen, maybe not so much, but they're just going to be here on the front line doing their thing. Balagai archers, a couple of them. Upgraded Balakith marksmen as well, very capable of skirmishing with the Gondorians, especially with the Naru Naru Royal Guard over here, a fantastic unit for such things. Balagai footmen back here as well, so far very much an archer focused approach, and then they do have some high tier units, but you can see that the Umbar army is lots of money spent on archers, and then a couple of units of basic spears, and then what's left goes to the higher tier infantry, but that's not much, because in a 5v3 you're not going to have much of a budget for that. But the Alcarondas Legion will still be fantastic later on in the battle for going toe-to-toe with that Gondorian heavy infantry. Back over here we also have the Ardenayim Shield Guard, which are locked morale, which again, maybe morale could prove to be the ultimate winner. I mean, we've seen some very close battles recently decided by fine margins. Locked morale is the sort of thing which can definitely tilt the odds in your favour. Now then, for the defenders, starting off with the first Gondorian player here, we have Darthy Darth. We've seen him a fair amount on the attack lately, nice for him to get a chance to be on the defence. We've got some upgraded Gondor archers. Like I said, this is probably where Gondor are going to try and sort of impart their influence on the battlefield. A couple of units of Marksman of Caer-Andros, and a fully upgraded unit of Veterans of Osgiliath, pretty much the full run of heavy Gondorian archers, so they're going to be in it for the long haul. Veterans of Osgiliath are of course locked morale as well. A trebuchet adds to their ranged presence as well, as of course do the rangers. Wardens of Minas Ithil being the armour piercing option, Athelian rangers being the standard body piercing. All of their skirmishers present, they're going to need all of them to play their part and fill their roles adequately, otherwise they will be in trouble. Fully upgraded Axemen of Lasarnak, armour piercing going to be useful against pretty much all the attackers to a certain extent, maybe less so with Harad, and maybe Khand as well, but considering how heavy they've got in for Nurads, they're still going to be useful there. So the Citadel Guard will also be useful, very high quality unit for holding the line with. In here we also have some Raven Helms of Caer-Andros, we have some Fountain Guard, which are going to be good for holding the line as well. Wardens of the White Tower. Do we have any Nimlothian Honor Guard? I believe we do, yes we do. So nothing too surprising here from the Gondorians, maybe slightly more archer heavy than we're used to seeing them, but on a map like this, in a situation like this, maybe that is necessary. Then we have Winged Swordsman 44's army. Yep, it is Winged Swordsman, and I imagine we're going to see something similar. Veterans of Osgiliath once again. Through the trees, more Marksmen of Caer-Andros, Athelian Rangers. He's gone for some Pelagia Marines, which I do think is wise. I mean, the Gondorians do want to contest the Javelin fight at the very least, even if they won't win against factions like Harad. They're still going to need this sort of close range punch for breaking up some advances, I think. Fountain Guard. Guards of Osgiliath are also a good pick, because pikes, obviously the range, I mean, there really isn't that much in the way of pikes on the field today. We saw some Southrons, but that really is about it. So Gondor with their Guards of Osgiliath could be dominant in that fight. More Fountain Guard. Gondor Spearmen, Wardens of the White Tower, Raven Helms and Axemen, Citadel Guard, lots of high tier units, and he has gone for a unit of Mithrandir's retinue as well. I mean, this is risky, but considering the compositions that the attackers have brought, they could actually be really, really useful, to be honest with you, because none of them have brought cavalry of their own. You know, anti-cavalry options are a little bit thinner on the ground, so I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's all going to be in the execution there, as it always is with cavalry, but how difficult that is can vary a little bit, and on this occasion maybe not as much. And then finally the player who sent me the replay, maybe Winged Swordsman 44 did as well. In fact, I'm fairly sure he did, given the amount that we've seen. Wardens of Minas Ithil, we have some... is that 2 units of Wardens of Minas Ithil? Plenty of armour-piercing arrows there. Wardens of the White Tower, Veterans, some Gondor Archers with only the first level of armour upgrade, but perhaps they feel as though that's all that's needed. A second unit, Mithrandir's retinue on this side, so it could be a fairly torrid time maybe for Rhun and Mordor. Maybe the Eastron crossbows will earn their salt a little earlier in this battle than they were thinking. Athelian Rangers, Citadel Guard, Pelagia Marines are here as well, Marksmen of Caer-Andros, Gondor Spearmen are there also, Gondor Infantry, Raven Helms, and a unit of civilians, presumably to be used a little bit more freely, seeing as the General's unit is actually the Wardens of Minas Ithil. So, I will make a little bit of a cut and we will rejoin whenever the attackers are really closing in on the defensive positions, wherever the defenders choose to pitch their tents after all, and maybe the cavalry gets in there first, we shall see. I'll rejoin whenever the first blows are being struck. So while the first blows haven't actually been landed yet, I will be rejoining because we are on the very cusp really of both sides coming into contact with one another, with Umbar here very, very close to the Gondorian forces that are taking up a position on this hillside up here. The Gondorians actually were kind of scrambling to get into this position. If Umbar had been a little bit quicker, they could have been able to get on top of the hill here and deny Gondor this slightly better defensive position. Indeed, they may have already done that to a certain extent by not allowing them to get to this little point here and allowing them to shoot right down along this this little narrow gap. I do think it makes a decent amount of sense that Umbar are the ones taking on this smallest of the choke points that are available to the Gondorians, because they've got the kind of quality that will give Gondor a bit of pause. Gondor, of course, have, as you can see, also retreated just that little bit further into the islands over here, which doesn't leave them many places to go, which is the downside to doing this, but it is a good deal safer, I think, than attempting to hold the outer settlements. And here we can see we are getting involved with some artillery action right from the off. What are they actually going after? Maybe some slightly stronger units back here. The Blackguard and the Olaghai are back here. I'd assume he's not targeting down the Moran on halberds, but these are the first casualties that have been inflicted on the battlefield irregardless of that. Brown halberds can easily be dealt with by the Gondorian archer force after all. Mordor and Rhun over here. Well, they also don't have the ability to... Ooh. Here comes the Hwacha. This is one of the things I was worried about, and this is another one of the problems with Gondor retreating in this manner. They're quite lucky actually in the sense that this second trebuchet is actually hidden by the ruin of the first, so as long as they keep it in position they probably won't lose both pieces of artillery unless they're very unfortunate. But yeah, the Hwacha is going to be an issue for the Gondorians as they have decided to consolidate their forces back here, but again that just shows a good deal of foresight I think from the Candish player to bring the Hwacha, because in a siege the temptation can be to not take this particular artillery piece, because it can be a lot more difficult to use than it is on the open field, where it's pretty much a tool you use to just force your enemy to move forwards. On this occasion though, because of how the map is constructed, the Gondorians have left themselves fairly open to this, and these are the kind of losses that can really add up early on and make Gondor's job significantly harder than it should be. I think they are going to be able to get that other trebuchet completely safe however, so there is something there for the Gondorians to hold on to. Not the best of starts here for Gondor, you'd have to say. No real desire from the attackers to move forward in any concrete fashion yet. There are some Athenian rangers sequestered away, more interested maybe in helping to counter Umbar than facing off against Harad and Khand, who are going to be Darthy Darth's most immediate threat. But as I was going to say before the Hwacha started firing, and we actually do have some Orc fodder moving forward, the players on this side do not have the ability to bypass the front island and go straight to the back one. They have to go through this choke point over here, which does mean that the Wind Raider is going to have to deal with two armies rather than just one, but from his perspective he should have the quality to at least initially make this quite a painful experience for Mordor and Rhun, especially if they intend on sending only Orc fodder initially, and with the cavalry coming in that was a very swift end to a doomed assault by Mordor's weakest infantry unit. Trebuchet trying to respond in kind to the Hwacha damage that has already been done. It's now moving off. I mean, DF Josh has already done his job over here, perhaps for softening up the Gondorians on this side, and maybe he can now inflict similar pain on those on the other. I mean, this unit of Orc fodder may return with this many men in the unit, so charging into them again and killing off more of them is not the worst idea. It's 3 kills after all. It's certainly not going to hurt you because the Orc fodder is not going to respond in any manner. This unit that isn't routing, however, acting as a screen. Their spears will be substantially more useful. Strong warriors on the path forward. It's the kind of matchup that Rhun should quite like, especially working in tandem with Mordor. It's going to be difficult for the Gondorians, but Gondor, when they're on the defence, are in their more natural environment. Meanwhile, still Umbar and Harad content to just sort of wait it out for the time being, consider what the defence has in store. Of course, all of the defenders have got Athenian rangers, so they're going to be waiting for the opportune moment to use them. And finally over here we do actually have the first inflicting of casualties from either side, really, with the marksman of Caer Andros shooting across the river into what, I wonder? The archer corps of Hunter or Hunted's Umbar force, but again, this is exactly what the Umbar archers are going to be very good at. Umbar and Gondor facing off against one another in an archer duel. I think Umbar would probably win because the Balakith marksmen, if you compare them to the marksmen of Caer Andros, have got that shield value and they can upgrade their armour, but having said that, it's very, very close, and I do think that overall, in an attacking sense of the word, the Gondorian archers have got a little bit more bite to them. Haradrim now moving forward. I like the fact that Pedro has moved forward a unit of dismounted Serpent Guard to assist with the Haradrim Spearmen, rather than on the other side we saw the Orc fodder crumble very, very quickly because they didn't have any kind of quality support with them. Not the case over here, although the Serpent Guard is still going to struggle because they're going up against a very accomplished infantry unit in the Citadel Guard. One of the examples as well where Gondor's armour piercing is useful against Harad, one of the only examples, and also with a bit of archer support as well, which Harad do tend to struggle with irregardless of units. Orc fodder moving forward, so they did return, having taken that damage already. There are gaps here for Mordor to maybe take advantage of. They can only do that if there's a decent chunk of infantry moving forward and some of it isn't liable to rout when they come under significant pressure. That was more of a bump than a charge, but the Orc fodder are already shaken, so this could yet yield the desired results. They're not routing just yet, but it would just take one unit of infantry in order to rout them, so unorthodox defence maybe, presenting these gaps and then immediately coming in to slam the door shut in their face with some infantry counterattacks, and of course Citadel Guard, the Orc fodder would be very lucky if they inflicted any kind of casualties here, which is why I'm quite surprised that Mordor are engaging in these kind of battles, because I don't think you're going to be able to fool Gondor into using their archer ammunition on them. And Gondor's defence has clearly been thought out. Whether it's going to work or not remains to be seen, but I don't think you're going to bait them into breaking formation just yet with this. Moran on infantry firing away into the Eastron crossmen across the way, which is a good idea. And also over here, Gondor shuffling forwards a little bit actually to engage with Umbar. And for now, actually, Umbar seems to be gaining the upper hand. The Alcarondas Legion fighting alongside the more defensively minded and lower tier Belagaya footmen. A big part of this is probably the support in terms of skirmishing that Umbar are getting. It's the kind of position which is actually working out quite nicely for Umbar. Gondor spearmen can withstand these kind of archer blows just fine, but between them and the Guards of Osgiliath taking damage from range, this Umbar infantry is going to start to make inroads unless winged swordsmen can change things up somewhat. And he's going to do so with some Pelagia Marines, which they'll be in the perfect position to rain down some punishment upon the Umbar infantry. Will be a good efficient use of them. And infantry units also on the move forward. Axemen of Lasarnak. And yeah, Axemen of Lasarnak being committed against Umbar is probably where they're going to be most useful on the field today, so that makes a good amount of sense. Nice glut of armour piercing damage coming in now, both ranged and melee. Do they have the angle? It's not a devastating angle to be honest, but it's better than nothing. If you can move over to here, you should do. And of course, Umbar already seeing the danger that the Marines pose, going to try and focus them down with their range damage. Most of what's being hit looks like Belagaya footmen, but it's better than nothing, I suppose. Meanwhile, Mordor moving forward. We did see them moving forward with a couple of units of Moran on infantry, and now Rhun doing the same with Eastron warriors. There's the Orc fodder. But even these units are starting to waver a little bit. Not enough support on the front line thus far for the evil side. Also the gaps. Another reason why the gaps are obviously here is to allow the cavalry to charge in when they are able, which they've already done, but for the moment Gondor content to allow their infantry to do the heavy lifting, which, considering, you know, Moran on infantry, Eastron warriors, and these units are particularly high tier, this is the best of what they're facing. Gondor's infantry should be just fine without any sort of major support, but a quick charge into the side of these Orc fodder could rout them. That's a good amount of manpower gone from the front line from this primarily Orcish assault so far. What's going on here? The odd volley from the Athelian Rangers, so just one volley from them. And then a quick charge coming in. The Lancers do come down, so that is going to be a charge. So plenty of routing, plenty of damage, utilising some of their higher tier options here, but obviously the Athelian Rangers just with one quick volley to do crippling damage, and then the infantry can have an even more efficient engagement. So far so good for Gondor over on this side. How about over here against the Haradrim? Things looking a little bit messier for both sides, you'd have to say, because both sides are able to deploy their skirmishers over here. The initial Harad assault taking an awful lot of damage, but Can pushing up some Nurad halberds in order to support that armour piercing. Going to be very useful against the Gondorians, but very vulnerable to their skirmishers. Another unit of Axemen of Lasarnak coming in, hoping that that armour piercing damage can break up this initial attack from the men of the south and far east. Nomadic raiders who are presumably out of ammunition just being thrown in to keep the attack going, which is fine as a stopgap, but the attackers will need to send another wave forward that's a little bit more substantial than this. Plenty of poison arrows being utilised here, the Serpent's Fangs. I mean, you can Gondor, but when their units are still fairly healthy, still relatively early on in the battle, obviously their armour helps them withstand the damage that these arrows can do as well. It's going to be a little bit more difficult. Some out of ammunition south on archers as well, so far the attackers just content to keep this assault going and allow their skirmishers to slowly pick away at the Gondorian manpower. I think having a look at the map over here, we're seeing a lot of the units go in the wrong direction from a red team perspective. Another charge coming in. This Mithrandir's retinue has proven to be a real menace, especially for the Mordor elements of these units that have been sent forward so far. I mean, the Orc fodder came back again, as did some Moran on infantry, but they're just going to be sent packing once more. And the Gondorian infantry will be very happy with the support they're getting. They too will be building up a fairly decent kill count for themselves, I would imagine. And that wasn't really a charge, they kept their swords drawn, but it's enough to rout the Orc fodder nonetheless. And I don't think they'll be coming back this time. Around on infantry routing, they probably will, still over 100 of them remaining, but a more comprehensive assault is needed here. The attackers are stumbling and stuttering over on this side, and Gondor are reaping the benefits. Over here, you can see Athelian Rangers, but they're hidden. It's the Pelagian Marines that they're going after from Winged Swordsman 44. Marksman of Andros joining on the front line now as well. Out of ammunition, I would assume. Alcarondas Legion now defeat seems certain. How many of these pikemen are left? Not that many by the looks of things, only 24, so that can't be the reason. Balakith Marksmen, they're out of ammo. Was that Balakith Marksmen, or was it just another unit? I swear there was a Balakith in here. Yes, 74 of them. Another unit of Belagire footmen as well to keep this assault ticking over. I have to say, actually, the Umbar forces do seem to have taken a fair amount of losses since last we checked in on this front line. You still imagine over time this is where the Gondorians may start to struggle, especially if Umbar can continue to support in the way that they've been able to so far. Belagire archers firing across the river into whatever targets they can perceive. There are Umbar. Meanwhile, Gondor reforming themselves after a successful repulsion of Mordor's initial assault, but we'll get back to that soon because Rhun are on the way. Meanwhile, this fight, still just out of ammo archers making up the vast majority at this point of the attacking front line. Still plenty of archers in behind trying to do the business. Again, they may be basic, but this is the kind of ammunition. I mean, you've got it's a 5v3. Any minor amounts of damage you can do with basic skirmishes like this are really going to add up, but Gondor are in a fairly good position to resist this kind of tactic as well because of their resilience and their armour. This is where it really does come into play. Veriag Bowman trying to do their thing, but you can see that there are a fair amount of dead Gondorians in behind the line which will never see melee combat. So you have dead Gondor archers, marksmen of Andros, the Citadel Guard back here, and of course in an effort to mitigate this, the reinforcements are now a little bit further away, so if Khand and Harad do suddenly lurch forward when this front line is a little bit more depleted, Gondor will be in less of a position to quickly respond, which is something worth bearing in mind for later, I think. Eastron Clansmen forward again. I still think that the attackers over here, I mean, Athelian Rangers. I mean, Athelian Rangers using up their ammunition here. I mean, there are Gamp Grim on the front line, as well as Eastron Clansmen, so maybe it is worthwhile just to really drive home a Gondorian sense of dominance on this front line. Orc Maulers being shaken by another charge of the Mithrandir's retinue. I mean, it's mostly what they've killed is low-end units, but they've killed a lot of them. But they are starting to show a little bit of wear and tear now, the Gondor cavalry. The Orc Maulers once again broken. And the Gondorian infantry line continues to hold. Elsewhere, I mean, they still have plenty of reinforcements. That's the thing in a 5v3. You can afford to be perhaps a little bit wasteful is maybe the wrong word, but a little bit reckless with what manpower you have available to you. Charge right through the heart of their own lines here. Yet more kills for the Gondorian cavalry. Driving through the centre of this unit of Eastron warriors. Again, basic units though they may be. Numbers are of course one area that the attackers need to keep their dominance. More of the Golden Boys now routing also. Orc Maulers, so it's very good for Gondor so far. But again, the attackers won't be panicking just yet. They still have plenty more where that came from. The initial Hwacha volley as well, opening up a little bit more wiggle room for them in terms of losses they can afford to sustain perhaps. Still nothing being committed over here in terms of extra quality just yet, but that, the unit of Hashari Shadow, so the mounted Hashari, right down the heart of this Gondorian front line. We've seen the Athelian Rangers used to fairly good effect already in this battle, and now seeing the same with Haradrim units. Bad news there for Darthy Darth. Meanwhile, on this front line, Umbar starting to actually run low on men on the front line. Marksman of Andros and Axemen of Lasana have had the desired effect with their two-handed weaponry. And the Alcarondas Legion, a single unit of them, some of them are still standing, but not enough to keep this attack going indefinitely. Balakith marksmen actually taking hits from armour-piercing arrows, so that will be the Wardens of Minas Ithil, of course. Trying to protect the Gondorian front line, which is now under a little bit more pressure once again from Umbar. I don't know whether it's worth using armour-piercing archers on the Balakith marksman, but it certainly will be a bit of a power move. It will prevent Umbar from being as effective in this kind of warfare as they usually are. There are 2 units of archers, still reinforcements. Umbar, of course, more of a quality focus. They've got less that they can simply throw at the front lines in the first place, as well as the fact that they're on their own on this choke point, whereas both the other 2 have 2 armies going after them. So Umbar do need to be a little bit more cautious, but for the time being, they've done okay, I think. Is this attack falling apart completely again? Yes. Mithrandir's retinue taking a couple more losses, but yet more of the forces of evil are going to be sent running to the hills or just straight up slain. It's Gondor front line now though. Gondor infantry looking a little bit battered and bruised. The civilians the same. Gondor spearmen also. So some units will be required on the front line, I think, if they're going to continue to hold on. Still the Trebuchet. Another tool that the Wound Raider maybe has at his disposal for later. What do we have here? Wardens of Minas Ithil shooting at something. At least they were. Maybe they were on fire at will. Maybe that was a mistake. And we've still yet to see Mordor or Rhun really commit their best units to the front, but by the same token, they don't really have much to show so far for their efforts. They haven't really managed to put Gondor under any pressure that Gondor wouldn't have been expecting. Now then, over here, this is looking a little bit more serious now. Southron pikemen anchoring the line in place, as well as some Nurad footmen coming forward, offering that armour-piercing bite that will be necessary against the better Gondorian units, having already been softened up by the skirmishers, and also with a real heavy hitter in the Nurad Storm Guard moving forward as well. This will be very concerning, I think. There are some Citadel Guard moving forward to help short the line, but I think more than just that is going to be necessary. I mean, you can already see Darth has sent a lot of his units further back still. I don't know if I like this. His army is very stretched here, and if his position falls, he's also screwed over Winged Swordsman 44 in a big way there, so he needs to hope that this front line can hold for the time being, and I actually agree with the fact that Harad and Khand are choosing now to be a little bit more aggressive and turn up the heat of it, because the potential rewards for them breaking through at this point means any good works the defenders have done so far may be in vain. I mean, this is a problem. The Athelian range is in a good position to take advantage of this cluster of units, but the Hashari Shadows are going to try and do the same. Return fire into the Athelian Rangers, kill them off as best they are able, and the Athelian Rangers are actually going to try and respond in kind. I would actually persist with what I was originally doing and try and shoot into that attacking formation, but no matter. Veterans of Osgiliath, some of them firing up into the air. Is this situation looking like now? Umbar very much on the back foot now, without any more of the reinforcements. I know they've got a more limited army, but if they don't send forward reinforcements at this point, they're ultimately going to end up losing some serious ground here to the Gondorians. Higher damage infantry able to do the business. I think they have actually sent forward another unit of Alcarondas Legion. This one's far too healthy to be the original one. Maybe Umbar do need a little bit of help from Khand and Harad with just a couple of units of even just basic fodder to help give them the numbers that they need to help maintain in this assault. You can see some of the Axemen of the Sarnak having a completely and perfectly symmetrically red face, but not on their facial hair. But still, Axemen of the Sarnak proving their worth in this battle. Still a few pikemen left for Gondor as well, so both they and the Alcarondas Legion have had their good moments. Naran Arur Guard, Ardenheim Shield Guard, there's some Hashari Shadows moving across here, but at this point they are very depleted. Got a few good volleys though, so they're getting absolutely demolished by the Wardens of Minas Ithil. That unit of Athelian Rangers, very depleted, very Bowman picking up where the Hashari Shadows left off. This is the problem. Gondor needs to get some reinforcements on this front line. It says defeat seems certain for the Nurad Storm Guard, and that may be because of the, you can see Hwacha volleys being let loose in the background, damaging the castle. There are gaps now in the Gondorian line. The Fountain or Nimlothian Honor Guard would be enough to slam shut those. Again, getting a little bit greedy maybe with the trebuchet, pushing it into a position where it was exposed, and the Watcher took advantage of that. Fair amount of ammunition the Watcher had to use. Fair amount of damage is also done to the castle, which Evil will hope to hold. This is maybe a little bit more of a serious assault now, however, from Mordor and Rhun. The Scion Rune once again wavering, pushing through the enemy front line. Pelargia Marines are there. Veterans of Osgiliath trying to use fire arrows to rout this attack, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult this time. Certainly a lot more serious. Rhun Halberdiers in the background, moving forward. Also, Athelian Rangers trying to do their thing. Eastron Warriors. Several of these runic units shaken as a result of these volleys of flaming shot, Fountain Guard, but the potential rewards here for the attackers are significant. The Gondorians are guilty of a little bit of complacency here from their earlier successes. This could be where all of that progress goes firmly up in smoke. Into Minister shooting. I mean, they have little choice here, Gondor, but to dump an awful lot of their resources all at once now. Otherwise, their front lines are going to be found out. Veterans of Osgiliath being engaged in melee. They won't mind that too much. Locked morale. They don't want these halberdiers to get set if they can help it. Winged Swordsman 44 also, with his attention elsewhere on the other side of the battlefield. He's getting his cavalry out there now, but they were just sort of standing in melee against halberdiers, which is not what you want. Olag High moving forward alongside the Morannon units that have already been committed. Gondor have got plenty of units that can counteract the Olag High, Citadel Guard being among them, but as part of a really big assault like this, the damage spike that trolls can offer you can be something really difficult to overcome. More flag rims swarming forwards. Raven Helms on the path forwards as well. Minister Thiel taking hits from across the way. Eastron crossbows also trying to do their thing. I mean, it's going to be difficult to see what sort of damage crossbows are going to be doing, but they need to slam the door shut in this Mordor advances path. Gondor archers are something, I suppose, but yeah, scary times for the Gondorians. They may need a little bit of support, actually, from their allies, if at all possible. I don't think there's any retreat from this situation either. Wynraiden needs to commit units to the front to make this an engagement that's worthwhile, and Mordor now sending forward the Blackguard of Barad-dûr as well, in an effort to bulldoze through another section of the front line, cause more chaos in the Gondorian lines. There are Fountain Guard here, there are still those javelins, there are still archer companies offering a little bit of support as well with the Fountain Guard. I mean, this could be a significant moment in favour of the Gondorians as well. If they can turn back this assault, I don't think the attackers will have the manpower to mount something on this level again. Indeed they won't. I mean, this has been very much a big commitment from them. The Umbar general falls at the hands of Winged Swordsman's front lines. And his refuge still moving around, so let's have a look. I mean, Umbar as well, kind of in a similar situation. I mean, if they decide to move forward with everything they have now, which they are, they're not going to have the ability to do this again. So these are really the decisive moments in the battle, I think. Certainly from an attacking perspective. Ardenheim Shield Guard will of course fight to the bitter end, which is all well and good, but they are a primarily defensive unit. They're not going to be the best at dealing damage to Gondorian infantry units when they're under range of fire and javelin volleys. It's going to be fairly tough for them, isn't it? Athelian Rangers there. Mountain Spearmen. Myriad Bowmen trying to offer a little bit of support by firing across the way, but so far all of these defensive skirmishes, while they have been doing damage to the Gondorians, there's not been enough quantity of it. Gondor have been able to hold on, meanwhile, over here on the Harad cammed front line. Doing a good job, considering for a little while there it did look as though the front line was going to fall apart. Still some Storm Guard in here. 44 of them in fact, so they haven't taken much damage at all really. Attacking javelins, this is still where you'd have to say the defenders, things could still unravel for them at any moment. The Red Halberds moving forward. I mean, this kind of damage being dealt to some of your better infantry units isn't really the sort of thing that can be sustained for an indefinite period of time. Very bowmen taking hits from the Wardens of Minas Ithil, marksmen ready. I mean, there are reinforcements ready for Darthy Darth. Meanwhile, over here, yeah, this attack looks like it's falling apart, honestly, which is a bad sign for the attackers. If the Gondorians can outright win over here, they have anything they can use to reinforce the other side, that would be seen as a major, major accomplishment. Probably will inform whereabouts the battle is going to be going as well. Temple Executioners. Flagrim, remaining remnants of the runic assault being dismantled and destroyed by the Gondorian defenders. So yeah, the Rune Raider will be very pleased with the performance of his army so far. Not out of the woods yet though. Still a few challenges to face before victory can be declared over on this side. Ones of Minas Ithil continuing to fire. A little bit of damage done to them. There goes the runic general.
Guard him well and make it so he can see us defeat the rest of his army.
That'll be a problem for Rhun. Rhun, morale-wise, can maybe hold themselves together a bit better than Mordor can, but they can still be a little bit susceptible to this sort of thing. Ones of Minas Ithil, I think they're going after the Dragon's Wrath Guildsman, which is fair enough. Still a dangerous enough unit. Cavalry now peeling off, having already done their work. The fact they're still alive is also quite impressive, so Temple Executioners, this really I think is more of a last stand for the attackers. Try and occupy and do as much damage to this Gondorian army as they can, which usually it's the other way around, you'd have to say, in an attack-defense dynamic. He seems certain for the marksman of Caer Andros. I think it is going to be down to Khand and Harad to carry the day for the attackers here, if they are going to be able to. Victory seems certain for the Nurad footmen. Plenty of armour piercing of varying tiers to try and crack through that Gondorian plate. Umbar, there are some Haradrim units now coming over here from Pajo to try and support. Maybe this should have happened earlier. Umbar being the smallest of the attacking armies, being the one to have to tackle a choke point alone, the most difficult choke point. Perhaps in hindsight that wasn't the finest idea. Ardenheim Shield Guard still doing their thing, but the Gondorian lines thus far holding on just fine, even with the newly arrived Harad reinforcements. There's a few clear projectiles, Mariag Bowman, Castamir's Rangers trying to do their thing, so Umbar still going to be capable of doing damage, but if they can completely destroy this army, that does give them an out for their cavalry as well to start pestering the back lines of the still intact Khand and Harad forces. There will be no need, I think, to retreat all the way back over to here, this sort of rear castle this time around. Of course, I think the intended final stand technically is this castle over here, but it's so close to one of the outer choke points that I don't know. So far, the defenders haven't really had to puzzle through what to do if things start to turn against them. Rhun and Mordor, in comes another charge from the Mithrandir's retinue. You'd be very interested to see what sort of kills they achieved come the end of the battle. All of these units returning from routing. A makeshift final wave, as it were. Victory seems certain for the Blackguard of Barad-dûr. That's a little bit surprising. And those Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen are getting in behind enemy lines, causing a bit of havoc, going after the Warns of Minas Ithil, trying to stop those armour-piercing arrows from continuing to fly, but no, I think that's somewhat of a doomed endeavour. Maybe Mordor can still be victorious with some Temple Guard action on the front line. Orc Javelins might be the sort of thing as well. Gondor's starting to run a little bit low, perhaps, on manpower. They still have another unit of Citadel Guard that can be committed forward, and maybe that is needed to help bring the Temple units to heal. Pretty strong crossbows, some of them are routing. Ravenhelm's doing their best. Some routing from the Gondorians, so finally, perhaps, maybe a Pyrrhic victory is possible for the attackers here. They are getting in behind enemy lines. What sort of support will be offered? Probably not all that much. Veterans of Osgiliath will fight to the bitter end. There are, of course, these marksmen of Caer Andros in the backfield, the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen, and Wardens of Minas Ithil. Their target, still 4 Mithrandir's retinue. Bit of a clumsy charge that, but yeah, things are developing here. Perhaps this will give Khand and Harad the impetus they need to really start advancing forward. Really start putting the Gondorians under a lot of pressure, and that is what they're doing. I mean, there are more Ravenhelms on the front line now. They'll be very, very effective against Muhard units, of course, but defensive Osgiliath, firing from across the way. Watcher needs to be very careful, it's very close to the cliff, it could end up rolling off in classic Medieval 2 fashion. More archers coming in. The Gondorian archers have been a problem for the attackers throughout the entirety of this battle, really. Myriad bowmen are over there. Meanwhile, what is going to be Umbar's fate? Well, Umbar's fate may be that they're already completely gone except the Castamir's Rangers. Gondor can claim victory over here, really, which means Winged Swordsman, I think, needs to get some units over to help out the Womb Raider. If that's cavalry, then so be it. Bit of reforming going on, Demons of the Desert. I mean, his cavalry actually is in the open field here, like I said, now really getting in and amongst some of the softer elements of what is going to be the primary attacking army at this point. If they're going to be victorious, it needs to be from over here. They still have plenty of reinforcements that can be used, including Trollmen, Brotherhood of the Axe. Gondor have had to commit an awful lot of themselves here, and they do need to outright beat Rhun and Mordor and have something to show for it at this point. And no, the other unit of Citadel Guard was committed forward, but the sheer might of the temple units, and I think there are Nazgul in here as well by the looks of things, proving to be a problem. It's covered a heavy cost, but maybe Rhun and Mordor have succeeded in turning this around. Still some halberdiers as well to help anchor things in place. Temple Executioner is very depleted at this point, but in spite of all his good works, the Womb Raider may end up on the losing end of this engagement, which is bad news for the rest of the defenders. Winged Swordsman 44's army is in the best condition. Darthy Darth has been constantly fighting a rather messy engagement against Khand and Harad. Fountain Guard continuing to do, I think, 49 Wards of the White Tower as a significant unit. They have managed to sort of reform their backlines to a certain extent. Wards of Minas trying to shoot the remaining units of them. The Lothian Honour Guard from Winged Swordsman moving across, so some future proofing being done. Still too much of Winged Swordsman army is over here for me. He's already won against the Umbar infantry, doesn't need that much left over there now, just to marshal against some flanking move that Khand and Harad may wish to engage in, but other than that, not only for the Womb Raider, but he may also need to reinforce Darthy Darth if this continues to be the case. Nomadic Axemen, again more armour piercing, but this is very low end armour piercing, the sort of thing which Ravenhelms won't be too concerned about dealing with. What about that cavalry? What has become of the Mithrandir's retinue that was over here? A little bit of a counter-attack. Veterans of Osgiliath, I think this is a little bit of a mistake from Winged Swordsman, sending them into the Lion's Den, really. A good opportunity for this Serpent Guard to deal with them in a more efficient manner. Elsewhere, still some Balakith marchers, still a little bit of Umbar presence on the field. Mithrandir's retinue waiting for their opportunity after some defences were put up to try and mitigate their presence. More Nurad footmen being committed forward. I mean, that's something you can say for the attackers over here. They managed to keep a consistent assault going. That'll be a bit of a worry though. There may only be 6 Athelian Rangers, but this is the sort of thing by which this battle could still have its twists and turns. Winged Swordsman has sent over a unit of Fountain Guard as well as Nimlothian Honour Guard, so this may finally be enough to bring this force down. Excuse me. Maybe my voice holds together for this recording session. Temple Guard still here, so still this unit of Mithrandir's retinue contributing to the Gondorian efforts. Do charge in. Anything they hit with a charge should perish, but it's not going to be in any great numbers anymore. These strong crossbows in trouble. Fountain Guard in enough numbers to continue to do decent damage. I mean, I think they will be victorious over here, the Gondorians, and that will allow them to refocus on the other side of the battlefield with whatever they have left over here. But those Nazgul is still going to be a bit of a concern. Wards of Minas Ithil able to shoot. looked like Mordor and Rhun were going to rally. Without the support from winged swordsmen, that would have been the case. They would have been victorious over here. So those elite infantry units arrived just in time to help solidify a Gondorian victory, which I think was well earned over on this side of the field. Whether that will be enough to deal with all that the men of the south and far east still have over on the other side of the field remains to be seen. Kind of depends how much Winged Swordsman 44's army was able to hold up under the Umbar assault as well, which I think it was relatively well in the grand scheme of things. So Gondor will fancy their chances, I think, moving into the latter part of this battle. Still a unit over here apparently. Something managed to get in behind enemy lines. It's the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen in and amongst the Athelian Rangers. I mean, the Athelian Rangers should be in high enough numbers to win this, but the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen are a dangerous unit, and they are succeeding in killing off these Dunedain of the south. There's a few units to Selgard, one's a Minas Ithil. Ravenhelms are still there, still another unit of Fountain Guard, one's the White Tower, so still a good army here that can be utilised. I don't know, this could still go either way, and with the winding down of that Umbar front line really, and the defeat of Rhun and Mordor as it has eventually come, we head into what is approaching the final 10k frames, into the final phase of this battle, with the situation slightly in Gondor's favour percentage-wise, but of course percentages, it still means that the attackers will have more in terms of manpower there. But is it going to be the right kind of manpower to bring the plate-clad Gondorians to heel? Only time shall tell. Let's just have a quick cursory glance, I suppose. I mean, Brotherhood of the Axe will, of course, be very useful. Narad Halberds will, Narad Footmen will, Serpent Guard, a lot of good units here. Champions of Nathrat, very scary, and 2 units of Trollmen as well. Brotherhood of the Spear, Serpent's Fangs, Nomadic X-Men. I mean, none of these units are actually all that... They're all pretty good. But, you know, the other thing you could say is, have Khand and Harad left this maybe a little too late? They still have all of these resources while their 3 allies have largely perished at this point. Was it worth it to keep them back until the late game, especially seeing as they have to be the ones to advance towards the Gondorians, and the Gondorians can set the table in such a way that mitigates the danger to them. I don't know how much ammunition or men capable of deploying that ammunition the Gondorians actually have left, but that could also prove to be a very significant factor moving into the final stages here. A carpet of dead bodies from both sides. And there are still 3 Nazgul here. That, I would assume, is the canned general, considering the Storm Guard have been committed for quite a while. And that is something else the attackers need to be a little bit careful of. Morale is something they are more likely to suffer with, given how they are going to have to try and approach the situation. I mean, this assault is also in a little bit of danger of falling apart. Some guards of Osgiliath helping to shore up the front line. Brotherhood of the Axe have moved forward, but a more substantial assault than this is going to be required if success is going to be forthcoming. Variax. Still all those trollmen left. Athelian Rangers shooting across the way. I think just trying to do some chip damage to that unit of Serpent Guard, which, considering there's only 6 of them, I mean, any damage they can do is going to help contribute to victory. One's Minas Ithil hiding. One of a token force, but I mean, a little bit more than a token force, I suppose. One's a Minas Ithil from Darthy Darth. Out of ammo, but still a multiple HP unit, so charging in, mucking in on the front line now. Still a few Storm Guard left. I mean, goes to show how scary a unit the Storm Guard are. They've been involved in this fight for an awfully long time, and there's still a not insignificant amount of them on the front line as well. Pike to pike, of course. The Guards of Osgiliath easily superior to the Southrons that they perceive. Also crossbowmen trying to get in position, but they've already been savaged a little bit by some Gondorian ranged units. Winged Swordsman now on his way across with the units that supported the Wound Raider. Now heading over here. Speaking of which, there is still the small matter of those Nazgul. Minas Ithil are there. Are there still Nazgul? Veterans of Osgiliath. Are they still alive in and amongst this mess? Doesn't look like it. They have been... Oh no, there is one. One remains. Going after the Gondorian general by the looks of things, although that will only... Oh, a blank fire, that's unfortunate. Did actually hit there. Didn't kill that unit though, didn't even bloody it up. A bizarre thing. I don't think this is going to prove to be decisive one way or the other, but still. Benny Hill music plays as the one chases one, the other chases the other. Still, I mean, I don't know. I mean, more units are heading over here now, so Wind Swordsman is correct in leaving these units over here as a defensive bulwark, but units here, the Fountain Guard that was so effective. Generally the Gondorians are going to be able to rely on their Fountain Guard, that's nothing new, but... Dismounted Serpent Guard starting to take a fair amount of punishment here. Further afield. Guards of Osgiliath, several of them getting a little bit buckled here in the middle of their formation. Storm Guard taking a little bit of damage, but still eager, though very tired. Brotherhood of the Axe taking damage more quickly, but still a danger to the Gondorians, and Warriors of the White Tower won't particularly like being in melee with these heavy axemen. Trollman, still the Watcher over there, but I mean, the problem with the Watcher is it's completely indiscriminate. So if you've got units on the front line that you can't really afford to use, you can't use the Watcher because it's going to mow down as many of your men as the enemy. Mountain Guard all the way forwards, nothing an Honour Guard waiting in reserve. Trollmen, I think maybe they have waited just a little bit too long here, Harad. I mean, if they had committed stuff like the Trollman earlier, it would have been the sort of thing to put Gondor under an awful lot of pressure. But now Gondor can afford to completely focus on the Trollman, dedicate all their effort to trying to stop the most dangerous Harad infantry, and that may be to their detriment here. We've seen in the past sometimes the attackers that do save themselves till the very end make a difference in a positive way, but I can't help but feel as though this might be an example of a negative. Mithrandir's retinue, they are depleted, but I think now we're going to see the Watcher, the option of just trying to mow down your own men with the Watcher is going to be taken away from them now, with Wind Swordsman running them down with his cavalry. The Corsair crossbows could also go the same way, which would be a significant loss actually. That's the kind of supporting unit that would be super useful. Meanwhile, another little assault over here. I say a little assault. May only be 2 units, nomadic axemen and Nurai footmen, but they were completely healthy, and they are fairly numerous, going up against units that have already seen combat, fairly heavily depleted. Defeat seems certain. Defeat is almost a certainty.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
And this is the problem with the loss of the Candish general. Stuff like the nomadic axeman is always going to be a little bit more likely to collapse, and I don't think the attackers, I mean, it's not looking great for them, is it? Athelian Rangers moving in. Swords drawn. Just going to try and apply a bit of overwhelming force to the situation at this stage, the Gondorians, I think. Over yonder, Variag Bowmen committing themselves in. There are champions of Nathras on the front line who at this point are putting the Gondorians under some significant strain, so it could still go either way. There are still units back there. Not a great deal of reinforcements that can be committed by the Gondorians at this point, so I mean this is kind of it. If the Gondorians aren't able to withstand the Trollman, who are perfectly healthy at this stage, and I mean, if I were the attackers, I would try and just roll in with everything I had. Another unit of Trollmen, Demons of the Desert. One volley from the Demons of the Desert would be enough to undo all of the hard work that the Gondorians have done to even get to this point where things are so finely poised in the late stages. Periag Bowman routing. This is the sort of thing that the Gondorians need to see a little bit more of. There's still Stormguard alive. Only 10 at this point, but still. Champions of Nathrat defeat seems certain. Fairly surprising. Still 6 Athenian Rangers doing their thing. The Womb Raider, with what little he has, he's going to throw in. Just, you know, these are the margins by which victory and defeat may be determined after all. Four Citadel Guard that have seen combat with Nazgul. Trollmen might be enough to finish them off though. There is still this force, let's not forget as well. This sort of Candish flanking assault is going to be brought down, so the Gondorians will have reinforcements, including a unit of Wardens of the White Tower. Not ideally suited for facing off against the enemies against them. Those Ravenhelms turning back to reinforce the position that needs them a little bit more. The Ravenhelms will actually be one of the better units to commit against the Trollman in terms of dealing damage to them. Yeah, there go the Nomadic Axemen. The Nurad Footmen will follow soon behind, and that will leave it being a one-front battle. The true final phase, if you will. Yeah, there go the Nurad Footmen, so the Gondorians immediately going to move back. Mithrandir's retinue are here. So, what will occur? I don't think the Gondorians are going to have enough, you know. Demons of the Desert getting in behind enemy lines. The Ravenhounds may be able to intercept them before they utilise their ammunition. But a combination of the Trollman and the anchor that the Nurad Halberds are offering them here is a massive problem. Are they going to be able to get a volley off here? That would be... well, no, they're not. Brotherhood of the Spear are going to be moving forward, however, to prevent the demons from getting engaged in melee by the Ravenhounds. Several of the Ravenhounds moving through the Brotherhood of the Spear. And the Serpent's Fangs, I think, are the final unit committed, so this is pretty much everything, I believe. Aside from the battered unit of Corsair Crossbows, but it is looking like the attackers are going to have just about enough here. And in spite of some heroics, in some cases, by the Gondorians, they didn't have enough to mount a defence like that for a third time. Ran out of manpower in the end, I think, is the way. Still ahead by 1 percentage point, according to this. With the Gondorian generals starting to fall as well, that's a bad sign. Demons of the Desert taking a lot of damage, actually. But yeah, the Trollman. The finisher. All the attackers. Still these units moving in to flank. Corsair Crossbows. I mean, maybe not all is lost yet. If the Trollmen do end up taking a lot of damage at the hands of the Gondorian defenders, but somehow I don't see it. At this point it's kind of a messy fight even. Serpent's Fangs moving over to finish off the 6 Athelian Rangers. I don't know how many kills they would have racked up. Just quietly doing their thing over here, but there you go. Trollman of Harad, Brotherhood of the Spear, so slow and steady wins the race for Khand and Harad by the looks of things over here. Winged Swordsman forming up kind of a de facto last stand, I guess. There's not that much of the battle left, however. So is this going to be it? The outer island is going to be the site of the final battle. Charging in with the cavalry, trying to do the business against the champions of Nathrat. And they fall at the hands of the Corsair Crossbows. Yep, I mean, very much a game where the Gondorians were doing well, but it was coming at a cost the whole time. And I did worry about this choke point over here from the early stage as well, from Darthy Darth, where it was looking a little bit more suspect than his allies were in terms of the losses he was taking how messy the fight was on both sides. The attackers can afford to sustain that kind of fight far more than you will be able to as the defenders, and so it's proven to be here. It's a difficult map to defend, I think, as the defenders as well when you consider things. It's very open. There are a few choke points you can hold, yes, but there are good opportunities for the attackers to use their ranged support as well as, obviously, in this case, their superior numbers. So it was always going to be difficult for the Gondorians. They made a good fist of it, but in the end, their victories ceased going into the final phase. And Harad and Khan's patience did pay off in the end. So it's ×2 speed to the end here. The brave Gondorian last stand, very close though. In the end it is going to be 2 to 3% the difference. There we have it.
Our ally lies dead. Slain our allies have fled the field like cows.
Run through by the demons of the desert there. And that, I believe, is going to be the final Gondorian general. All three of them dying very late on, so they managed to stay alive for a good amount of time. And that is going to be that.
Our enemies have snatched victory from us like thieves in the
3%. A good battle all round, I think. I don't think anyone played poorly. Always going to be difficult for the defenders in a 5v3 to try and reconcile themselves with the numbers disadvantage they find themselves at, but here we are. So, having a look at the kill counts, pretty similar actually all round from the Gondorians, which isn't too surprising. The Rune Raider was slightly more, but again, Rhun and Mordor coming forward in big numbers, allowing those cavalry and ranger shots to be just a little bit more efficient, but even then, both of his allies did very well. Winged Swordsman getting slightly less, but that makes sense because they were going up against Umbar initially alone, and then they were sort of the last one standing to try and get Gondor across the line, but by that point it was always going to be very, very difficult. As for the attackers, differing fates. Umbar and Rhun suffering the most, but again, based on what we saw, that's not too surprising, but very similar kill counts behind the players that sort of approached the battle in similar ways, I think. So let's see what did the damage for each Gondorian army. Darth's army, probably the one that struggled probably the most in the earlier stages to really get a more domineering position, but still some good kill counts here from the Wardens of Minas Ithil. The Ravenhelms doing quite well, a good battle for the Ravenhelms actually. Fountain Guard obviously doing well, also being one of the late game things to give Gondor a bit of hope. 468 from the Athelian Rangers, exactly the sort of thing you'd expect to see, and plenty of units breaking 100 as well in terms of their archers. Winged Swordsmen, late on some of these units were committed. The Lothian Honor Guard were more of a closing unit really to help out the Rune Raider. Fountain Guard doing quite well. Guards Skiliath acting as a decent anchor, but not a huge amount of kills. Citadel Guard, Wardens of Minas Ithil doing quite nicely for themselves. Athelian Rangers from him not doing quite as well as Darth's, but 226 is still just about acceptable, I'd say, depending on what they were killing. And Marksman Karandros, again, the archers doing it nicely as you'd expect from a Gondorian defence like this. And finally, the Rune Raider, 2 units of Wardens of Minas Ithil, one doing better than the other. Wardens of the White Tower, again, more of a... You know, they were under a lot of pressure because they only really got committed when that big Mordor and Runic assault happened. The Mithrandir's retinue was used very, very well by him as a defensive unit. Cavalry can be a bit hit or miss on this occasion, very much a hit. Athelian Rangers, 333, again, acceptable. Not fantastic for Rangers, but acceptable. Citadel Guard doing nicely on the front line. Fountain Guard, plenty of units breaking 100. Some not though, some maybe not doing quite so well with 20 here and there from units which you'd expect to do a little bit more. But you can't be too picky. I mean, these are the margins by which Gondor maybe lost the fight, but the attackers are always going to make it as difficult as possible for you to be efficient, so you can't really help things too much there. So yeah, a good battle this. Big thank you to the Rune Raider and probably to Winged Swordsman 44 as well for sending this one in. I still don't know if that was the case. I think it probably was based on the amount that Winged Swordsman gave me, and he was a part of this one, and also it was a high quality battle as well. But still, big thank you to both players regardless. Big thanks to all the rest of the players as well that were a part of this battle replay. Must have been a fairly fun one to be a part of actually, given the backs to the wall style defence that the Gondorians were able to mount for so long. As for what's coming up soon, really I'm on the last run of videos I'm going to be recording on my current PC, which I've had since before I started the channel. So that goes to show how old and sort of knackered really this PC is getting. So this will be its last stand in many ways, this run of replays from Winged Swordsman 44. I don't know exactly when that's going to fall, but sometime in June I will make the switch over. I'll have my PC in June. but I'll be making the switch over in terms of recording at some stage then. Yeah, other than that, there's still the matter of a live stream update to do. As soon as I have a little bit more of an idea about what's going to be happening, which I still don't know exactly. There's a lot of variables in play. I think 2022 is going to be, as a whole, a little bit difficult to predict in this regard. But one way or another, by the year's end, there will be some kind of closure on the things happening in my life at the moment and the potential upheaval that will allow me to, one way or the other, make some changes to the channel for the better. Because at the moment, as it has been for really just a little over a year at this point, the channel has been largely in just a state of stasis, more sort of survival mode, where I keep the schedule as is, just to keep it ticking over before I can actually put a little bit more effort and time into reorganising things for the better. Initially, the plan was going to be that in late summer, early autumn, I would be able to do this. Based on new information, that may have to wait until closer to the end of the year. But considering at this point of recording we're already in May, and by the time this one comes out it'll be late May, it's not the end of the world. But again, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the live stream update. I mean, it may be that things change again, but they can only change positively again at this point. So yeah, it is what it is. That's something else to consider. The bracket updates, or the bracket battles I should say, will be the sort of thing which do make a resurgence as well. I've only done one and I did intend to do more, but of course based on my work schedule I have to record in bulk, which means these are the replays I can do far more efficiently. There will be another bracket video coming out at some stage in June, however. That will be a certainty. And yeah, other things we can discuss at a later date, I think. But enough rambling for now. Big thank you to the Wind Raider. Big thank you to Winged Swordsman 44. Big thanks to all the players as well. I hope you enjoyed this, and hope you'll join me for whatever is next.